Good evening, everyone. I wanted to talk to you tonight about something that I'm very passionate about, and that is the personal value of equity. Equity is often misunderstood. We often hear equal treatment as a tagline of fairness, and we hear about this in every aspect of our lives, from the education system to healthcare, law enforcement. Even our founding fathers said that all American citizens should be treated fairly, not equitably or justly, when in fact what is most fair and what is most just is approaching life through the lens of equity. I work in a public school system, and I deal with the part of the population who is most vulnerable. Sometimes it's physical disabilities, or Down syndrome, or mental challenges. Sometimes they're just students who are dealing with poverty, and therefore there's a huge gap in their support system, and so they've fallen behind their peers. And a lot of times, something as basic as taking out a library book, which is something that every student is entitled to, that's an opportunity that's offered, is different than an opportunity that is supported. So a child who comes from a home where reading is maybe not a priority, things are disorganized, their coffee table is covered with newspapers and different items. A student will lose a library book if they are fortunate enough to even understand what to do with a library book by taking it home, taking it out of their bag, and then returning it to school. These same kiddos then face the consequence of library fines, and yet they're doing nothing more than trying to follow the system that is in front of them, which is to borrow the book and bring it back. However, the system is not made for them in a way to help them understand what the expectations are. The same thing is true about science projects. So you have an extra credit science project, or maybe it's not even extra credit, it's a straight up science project. And the idea is that a student has the familial support or some type of resource to have assistance and get that done. Many students do not have that. And so as a school employee, sometimes I bring in the extra parts, the pipe cleaners or cotton balls and things like that. It would not make sense for me to do that for every sixth grader who has a science project due, but I do it for the kids who need it, and I meet them where they are at. And that's truly what equity means, is meeting the person where they are and giving them the assistance they need to get what they need for that to happen. Affirmative action is an example of that, and it's something that we often hear about. People have strong feelings against it because of giving a person an advantage over another person. However, if you look at this poster here, this spells it out pretty well. Equality is on one side and equity is on the other. And you can see in equality, each person, despite what they need, gets the exact same thing. The tallest person and the shortest person all get the same box. And it does not help the shortest person to see over the fence. And it does improve the vision, of course, for the tallest person, but he really didn't need it. If we're talking about equity, we have the same number of boxes. It's no additional resources. It's the exact same amount that we started with on this side, but it's divided differently. And now each person is able to see at the same vantage point. And the purpose of things like affirmative action or Head Start programs like for kindergarten is to give everybody the same starting point. Would it make more sense to have, would this guy benefit more if he had a box? Sure, but he doesn't need the box. It would just be additional support for him. And so this picture you can also take even further and talk about who gives the boxes. Where does that come from? And who decides who gets them? And one of the reasons that I feel equity is such an important value is that it's up to us to decide what is equitable. And so when we're talking about things like the Head Start program, which is what gives young children the advantage of early childhood education, we know as a society that giving people, the earlier we start, the better. So why do we stop believing that after kindergarten? Or why do we change that idea? So many times we are moved as a society or as individuals by hardship stories. Stories of people overcoming hurdles and obstacles and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and things like that. And yet we follow those stories in Hollywood, but in our regular daily lives, we rail against it often, and we say, why can't that person try harder? Why doesn't that person understand? And the person, it's not about trying, and it's not about any type of missed opportunity. They simply didn't have the opportunity or the understanding. And we operate on this assumption that if everyone just tries hard enough, everything could be the same. And it's simply not true. If we look even closer at this, we can talk about the ways that parents can relate to this, in that if you have 3 children and you want to get dance lessons for one of them's an avid dancer, you don't give all the children dance lessons because one of them wants it. Maybe one wants art class or one wants cooking class. And you give something to everyone, but you meet them where they are at, and not saying, dance for you, then it's dance for everybody. And equity is about understanding the different needs and putting supports in place to achieve the best outcomes. So I implore you, the next time you have a decision to make and you need to formulate an opinion, whether it's for political reasons or in your professional life or simply with a child in a school district, or you're reading an article and thinking about it as that's not fair, ask yourself, is it equitable? Does it make sense from the standpoint of giving people what they need where they're at? Because after all, not offering a boost to the shortest kid behind the fence means that someone is not getting a fair shot. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and I really appreciate it.